The scream tore through me like a blade, raw and jagged, echoing in the vast library where I stood frozen. Noah's small hands clutched his ears, his face twisted in a pain I could not name, and James Harper's voice followed, sharp as shattered glass. "What did you do to him?" I was 16, a maid's daughter with a sketchbook, and in that moment, I held a truth no one else could see. I had not broken the boy. I would rebuild him. The mansion's library smelled of old leather and dust, its towering shelves swallowing the light from a single chandelier. That first day, I had slipped inside, my sneakers silent on the marble floor, my backpack heavy with pencils and dreams I never spoke aloud. Mother had warned me to stay in the kitchen, to keep out of sight. But the mansion was a labyrinth, each door a whisper of secrets. I was not supposed to be here. Neither was Noah. I found him behind a velvet chair, a boy no older than 8, his dark hair falling over eyes that stared at a blue pencil like it was the only thing tethering him to the world. Noah Harper, the son of a man who owned empires, sat cross-legged, silent as the grave. I knew the rumors. His mother, Sarah, gone 2 years now, and his voice with her. I did not speak. I did not need to. I unzipped my backpack, pulled out my sketchbook, and sat a few feet away, the carpet soft beneath me. My pencil moved, tracing a fox curled under a tree, vines twisting into stars above its head. The silence was not heavy. It was alive. Noah did not look at me, but I felt his gaze shift, a subtle turn of his head, like a deer sensing a rustle in the forest. I kept drawing, my strokes steady, the scratch of graphite a quiet rhythm. Orange for the fox's fur, green for the leaves, gold for the stars. He slid closer, an inch at first, then another, his clothes whispering against the carpet. I did not flinch. I did not smile. I just drew. He reached into his pocket, his movements slow, deliberate, and pulled out a crumpled tissue. Inside were 2 broken crayons, yellow, red. He placed them beside my sketchbook, not touching me, not speaking, but offering something sacred. I paused, my heart a drumbeat in my chest, and met his eyes for the first time. They were not empty. They were oceans, deep and waiting. I picked up the red crayon, drew a small heart on the fox's chest, and slid it back to him. He stared, unmoving, then took the yellow crayon and drew a wobbly circle in the page's corner. A sun, uneven but bright. I nodded a silent vow and turned to a new page. We were building something, wordless and fragile, but real. The library became our sanctuary. Each day after school I returned, my backpack heavier with colored pencils, flashcards, and books I borrowed from the library's forgotten corners. Noah was always there, waiting, his silence not a wall but a bridge. We drew foxes, rabbits, trees, each line a conversation no one else could hear. I learned his patterns, yellow pencil first, then blue, red, green, purple, always in that order, like a ritual to steady the world. I learned his glances, quick and sharp, checking if I saw him, really saw him. I did. That Sunday, the air felt different, heavier, like the moment before a storm. Noah sat by the window, his sketchbook open to a page he had chosen, a train he liked. I showed him a card with a pangolin, its scales glinting in the photo. "Chuan Shanjia," I said softly, the Mandarin rolling off my tongue. He blinked once, a sign he was listening. I began to draw, my pencil tracing the creature's armored tail. Noah watched, then picked up his own pencil, his lines rough but sure. The room was quiet, safe, ours. Then it happened. His pencil fell, clattering on the hardwood. Noah's hands flew to his ears, his body curling inward, and a scream erupted from him, not just loud but primal, a sound that seemed to claw its way out of somewhere ancient and trapped. I froze, my sketchbook slipping to the floor, my breath caught in my throat. "Noah," I whispered, reaching for him. "Noah, it is okay. I am here." But before my hand could touch him, the door slammed open. James Harper filled the doorway, his suit pristine, his eyes wild with something that was not anger but fear, raw and unmasked. He moved to Noah, lifting him into his arms like a shield, Noah's small body tense, resisting but silent now. James turned to me, his voice a blade. "What happened? What did you do?" I stood, my hands raised, palms open, as if to prove I had not shattered anything. "Nothing," I said, my voice trembling. "We were drawing. He was fine. Then he was not." My words felt hollow, useless against the weight of his stare. Noah's eyes darted to me, a flicker of panic, not betrayal. I caught it, and it crushed me. "It was not me," I said, quieter, more to myself. James's gaze was unreadable, cold. "You should leave," he said, already turning. Noah pressed against his chest. "Now!" The door closed behind them, a finality that echoed in my bones. I stood alone, the sketchbook scattered, a red pencil broken under James's shoe. I crouched, gathering what I could. My drawings, Noah's pangolin, the pencil he had dropped. My hands shook, not from fear but from something deeper, a certainty that I had not failed him. Not yet. In the car, Mother said nothing. I stared at my lap, the broken pencil in my fist, tears burning my eyes but refusing to fall. I thought I had ruined everything. But as the mansion faded in the rearview mirror, I felt it, a quiet, stubborn truth. Noah had screamed, yes, but he had also reached for me, trusted me, drawn with me. I was not done. I would go back. I would find him again. The car hummed beneath us, its engine a low drone that filled the silence Mother and I could not. My hands gripped the broken red pencil, its jagged edge pressing into my palm, a reminder of Noah's scream and James Harper's voice cutting through the library's stillness. "What did you do?" I stared at the passing trees, their branches clawing at the dusk, and felt a truth settle in my chest. I had not broken Noah, but I had to prove it. To him, to James, to myself. Mother's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles pale in the dim light. She glanced at me, her eyes soft but heavy with questions she would not ask. I wanted to tell her everything, how Noah's silence was not empty, how his crayons were words, how his scream had felt like a door slamming shut. But my throat was tight, my thoughts tangled in the memory of his eyes, wide with panic, searching mine for something I had not given him. Safety, maybe, or answers. I leaned my head against the window, the glass cool against my temple, and let the quiet swallow me. At home, I moved like a shadow, slipping past the kitchen where Mother began dinner, the clatter of pots a distant hum. My room was small, its walls lined with sketches, foxes, stars, trees, all echoes of Noah. I sat at my desk, the broken pencil before me, and opened my notebook. Its pages were a map of our days together, notes on his pencil rituals, colors he lingered over, the way his shoulders relaxed when I said, "Chuan Shan Jia." I had no training, no degree, just a library card and a stubborn heart. But I knew Noah was not lost. He was waiting. I pulled out my phone, its screen cracked from a fall last summer, and searched for answers. Nonverbal communication. Selective mutism. Sensory processing. The words blurred together, each article a puzzle piece I could not yet fit. One blog, written by a speech therapist, spoke of trust over technique, of listening before speaking. "Children like these," it read, "choose when to speak, not if." I read it twice, then 3 times, my pulse quickening. Noah's silence was not a cage, it was a choice. And he had chosen me. His crayons, his glances, his son on my page. I scribbled notes, my handwriting messy but sure. Trust. Patience. Presence. I would not push him. I would wait. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of Noah's scream, his hands over his ears, James's shadow looming. When morning broke, I packed my backpack with purpose, new pencils, a fresh sketchbook, flashcards I had made from index cards, each with a word in Mandarin, French, Spanish. Mother watched me from the kitchen, a mug of coffee in her hands. "Emily," she said, her voice low, "be careful." I nodded, unable to explain the fire in my chest, the need to return to that mansion, to Noah. "I will," I said, and stepped into the day. The mansion loomed as we drove up, its stone facade cold under the gray sky. Mother parked, her silence a quiet permission. I stepped out, my sneakers crunching on gravel, and felt the weight of James's words. "You should leave." But I was here, and Noah was inside, somewhere, arranging his pencils, yellow, blue, red, green, purple. I clutched my backpack strap, my heart a steady drum, and walked through the gate. The library was empty when I entered, its air thick with the scent of polished wood and old paper. Noah was not there. My stomach twisted, a flicker of doubt creeping in. Had James banned me? Had Noah retreated further, his scream a wall I could not climb? I set my backpack down, the thud loud in the quiet, and waited. The chandelier above flickered, casting shadows that danced across the shelves. I traced a finger along my sketchbook, its edges worn from use, and thought of Noah's son, wobbly but bright. Then I heard it, a soft shuffle, barely audible from behind the velvet chair. I turned, my breath catching. Noah sat there, cross-legged, his small hands arranging pencils in a perfect line. Yellow, blue, red, green, purple. His eyes did not meet mine, but his shoulders were soft, his fingers steady. He knew I was here. I knelt a few feet away, my movement slow, deliberate, like approaching a bird that might fly. "Hello, Noah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He blinked once, a signal I had learned to read. He was listening. I opened my sketchbook, pulled out a new page and began to draw. A rabbit this time, its ears long and soft. Noah watched, his head tilting slightly, his fingers pausing over the red pencil. I did not push, did not ask. I just drew, the scratch of my pencil a bridge between us. After a moment, he picked up the blue pencil and added a single line to my page. A curve, like a hill under the rabbit. I nodded, my chest warm, and kept going. We were not broken. Not yet. The afternoon passed in quiet strokes, our pencils moving in rhythm. I showed him a flashcard. Ciel, French for sky. He blinked twice, his fingers brushing the blue pencil. I smiled, small and careful, and wrote the word in my notebook. He did not speak, but he did not need to. His presence was enough, his trust a gift I would not squander. When Mother came to fetch me, her footsteps soft but urgent, I packed my things, my heart lighter. Noah glanced at me as I stood, his eyes quick but clear. "Tomorrow," I whispered. He blinked once. It was enough. That night, in his office, James Harper sat alone, the glow of his monitor casting shadows across his face. He had not slept, not really, his mind replaying the library footage, my hands Noah's scream, the pencils scattered like fallen soldiers. He had meant to fire Mother, to erase me from their lives, but something stopped him. A sound, faint but unmistakable, drifting from the living room at dawn. He had stood, his pen frozen above his papers, and followed it. There, on the rug, Noah sat alone, a sketchbook open to the pangolin we had drawn. His lips moved, soft and certain, forming a word James had not heard in 2 years. Neon bow. Mandarin for pangolin. James had stepped back, his pulse a roar in his ears, and pulled up the security footage. He watched it 10 times, then 20, searching for a glitch, a trick. There was none. Noah had spoken, not to me, not to a therapist, but to himself, because he wanted to, because he felt safe. James leaned back in his chair, his hands trembling, and stared at the ceiling. He had built walls around Noah, around himself, thinking silence meant absence. But Noah had been listening, choosing, waiting. And I, a girl with no credentials, had reached him. James did not understand it, not yet, but he felt it. A crack in the fortress he had built, a sliver of light breaking through. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Mother's number, and made a choice. The mansion's shadow loomed larger today, its stone walls swallowing the morning light. My sneakers crunched on the gravel path, each step a pulse of doubt. James Harper had called Mother last night, his voice clipped but clear. "Tell Emily to come back. Keep doing what she was doing." No apology for his accusation, no explanation for Noah's scream. Just a command, heavy with unspoken trust I was not sure I deserved. I clutched my backpack, its weight a reminder of the flashcards, pencils, and hope I carried. Noah was waiting. I could not fail him again. The library greeted me with its familiar scent, leather, dust, and something sharper like anticipation. Noah sat by the window, his small frame outlined against the glass, a sketchbook open on his lap. His pencils were aligned, yellow, blue, red, green, purple, a ritual that steadied my heart. He did not look up, but his fingers paused, a silent acknowledgement. I knelt a few feet away, my movement slow, as if sudden motion might shatter the fragile thread between us. "Hello, Noah," I said, my voice soft as the morning mist. He blinked once. He was here. I opened my sketchbook, its pages worn from our days together, and began to draw, a fox, its tail curling like a question mark. Noah watched, his eyes tracking each stroke, his hands still. I wanted to ask about the scream, to understand what had broken him that day, but words felt like intruders. Instead, I pulled out a flashcard, Lune, written in French. Moon. He blinked twice, his fingers brushing the blue pencil. I smiled, small and careful, and kept drawing. We were rebuilding, line by line, trust by trust. The morning passed in quiet rhythm, our pencils whispering secrets the mansion could not hear. I showed him Estrella, Spanish for star, and he added a gold dot to my page, his touch hesitant but sure. I felt the weight of James's gaze, not in the room but through the cameras I knew lined the ceiling. He was watching, always watching, searching for proof I was not a mistake. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on Noah's steady breaths, the way his shoulders softened when I said Chuan Shan Jia again. He liked Mandarin, its tones a melody he could feel. By noon, the library felt too still, its air thick with the echo of what we had not said. I needed to try something new, something to reach Noah beyond the page. An idea had sparked last night, reading about sensory learning, how children like Noah processed the world in layers, sound, touch, meaning. I closed my sketchbook, my heart a drumbeat, and pulled out a small paper pouch from my backpack. "Noah," I said, holding his gaze, "let us try something different today." He tilted his head, curious but guarded. I led him outside to the garden behind the west wing, a forgotten patch of earth where daisies fought through tangled weeds. The air smelled of damp soil and promise, the sun warm on my neck. Noah followed, his steps careful, his eyes darting to the ground as if mapping each blade of grass. I knelt beside a bare spot, the dirt cool under my fingers, and handed him a folded slip of paper. On it, I had written Liberté in soft cursive. Freedom. This is not for reading yet, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We are going to plant it. Noah stared at the paper, his brow furrowing, but he did not pull away. I gave him a tiny trowel, its handle worn from years of neglect. Right here, I said, pointing to the soil. He looked at me, then at the ground, and slowly began to dig, his movements precise, deliberate. The hole was shallow, just deep enough to hold a secret. I kissed the paper, a small gesture that made him blink, and placed it in the earth. Words are like seeds, I said, my eyes on his. They do not always grow right away, but if we care for them, they surprise us. Noah pressed the dirt over the paper, his small hands steady, then sat back on his heels, staring at the patch as if expecting it to bloom. We returned to the library, the moment lingering like a held breath. Noah drew a tree, its branches reaching for a sky he had not named, and I added a single star above it. He blinked twice, a silent thank you. When Mother came to fetch me, her apron dusted with flour, I packed my things, my chest warm with something new. Hope, maybe, or faith. Noah glanced at me as I stood, his eyes clear, unguarded. Tomorrow, I whispered. He blinked once. It was enough. In his office, James Harper sat before his monitors. The garden footage paused on his screen. He had seen it all. My pouch, Noah's careful digging, the paper buried like a vow. He did not understand it, not intellectually, but his chest ached with something he could not name. He had built his life on control, spreadsheets, schedules, systems that did not bleed. But Noah, his son, had knelt in the dirt, planting a word with a girl who should not have mattered. A girl who had heard him say neon bow alone in a room with no audience. James rewound the footage, his fingers trembling over the mouse. Noah's hands, small and sure, pressed the soil flat. My voice, soft but steady, said, "They surprise us." James leaned back, his tie suddenly too tight, and stared at the ceiling. He had hired tutors, therapists, experts with degrees framed in gold. None had reached Noah. None had made him speak. But I had, not with charts or rewards, but with pencils, paper, and a patch of earth. He wanted to dismiss it, to call it coincidence. But the truth was louder than his doubt. Noah was choosing, and he was choosing me. That evening I sat at my desk, my notebook open to a new page. I wrote Liberté, then sketched the garden bed, its soil dark and waiting. I thought of Noah's scream, how it had felt like a warning, not a rejection. I thought of James's call, his voice devoid of warmth but carrying a crack of something else. Trust, maybe. Or desperation. I closed my eyes, the memory of the garden's damp air filling my lungs, and made a promise. I would keep planting, keep waiting, keep listening. The next day, Noah was waiting in the library, a new flashcard in his hand. Soleil, French for sun. He had written it himself, the letters uneven but clear. He pushed it toward me, his eyes steady, and pointed to the garden. I smiled, my heart a spark in the quiet. We would plant again. But as we stood to leave, Noah paused, his fingers hovering over a new card in my stack. Belong, it read in English. His shoulders tightened, his gaze fixed on the word, and he did not move. I held my breath, the air suddenly heavy, and wondered what memory, what fear, had stopped him cold. Noah's hesitation over belong haunted me, his small hand frozen above the card, eyes locked on a word that seemed to carry a weight I could not measure. I wanted to ask, to pry open the silence, but I knew better. My sneakers sank into the mansion's garden soil, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth and bruised daisies. As I replayed that moment, I was 16, a maid's daughter with no right to be here, yet Noah trusted me, and James Harper, watching from his cameras, was beginning to trust me too. But trust is fragile, and today it would be tested. The library was dim when I arrived, its chandelier casting jagged shadows across the shelves. Noah sat in his usual spot, cross-legged by the window, his pencils aligned, yellow, blue, red, green, purple. His sketchbook was open to a new page, a half-drawn tree with roots that sprawled like veins. He did not look up, but his fingers twitched, a signal he was waiting. I knelt a few feet away, my backpack heavy with flashcards and the paper pouch for our garden ritual. "Hello, Noah," I said, my voice soft as the morning's fog. He blinked once, his eyes flicking to mine, then back to his page. We were still us. I opened my sketchbook, tracing a rabbit beside his tree, its ears tipped with gold. Noah watched, his blue pencil hovering, then added a single line, a hill under my rabbit, like the one from our first days. I smiled, small and careful, and pulled out a flashcard. Ciel, French for sky. He blinked twice, his fingers brushing the blue pencil. We drew in silence, the scratch of graphite a steady pulse, until footsteps, sharp, deliberate, broke the rhythm. The door opened and a woman stepped inside, her suit crisp, her smile practiced. Dr. Elizabeth Grant, a name I had overheard from Mother, a child behaviorist with a reputation that opened doors. Noah froze, his pencil clattering to the floor. I stood, my heart a drumbeat, as James appeared behind her, his face unreadable, arms crossed. "Emily," he said, his voice low. "Dr. Grant is here to assess Noah, Sis." The word landed like a stone. I nodded, stepping back, my hands clutching my sketchbook like a shield. "Doctor." Grant knelt before Noah, her voice bright, too loud. "Hello, Noah. I am here to learn about you." He did not move, did not blink. His face emptied, a switch flipped, and I felt a chill settle in my bones. For 40 minutes I watched her try. She spread out puzzles, sound games, reward charts, her voice rising with each failed attempt. "Noah, can you point to the happy face?" she asked, holding up a card. Nothing. She clapped near him, sharp and sudden to get his attention. He closed his eyes, his hands curling into fists. I bit my lip, my nails digging into my palms, as James's gaze darted between Noah and me. Dr. Grant moved closer, her tablet glowing with data, and Noah shifted away, his body a silent rejection. My chest ached. He was not unreachable. He was protecting himself. During a pause, James pulled me aside, his voice a whisper. "Has he regressed?" I met his eyes, steady despite the storm in my chest. "No," I said, my voice plain. "He is protecting himself." James frowned, his jaw tight. "From what?" I did not answer, but my gaze flicked to Dr. Grant, her clipboard, her insistence. The question hung heavy, unanswered as she resumed, her tone sharper now. "Noah, just one picture. Show me happy." Still nothing. She turned to James, her smile sympathetic but thin. "Some children plateau after small breakthroughs. We may need to reassess expectations." James nodded, his face pale, but I saw his hands tremble. When Dr. Grant left, her heels clicking down the hall, the library felt hollow, its air thick with what had not been said. Noah was curled near the bookshelf, cradling his blue pencil like it was glass. I knelt beside him, my movements slow, and waited. After a moment, he reached for his sketchbook, opened a new page, and began to draw. His lines were sharp, deliberate, a round face, eyes like flat stones, a mouth drawn in a severe frown. Over it, he slashed 4 red lines, thick and jagged. He dropped the pencil, looked away, his face flushed but calm. James, still by the door, stepped closer, his voice soft, almost afraid. "Is that me?" I shook my head, my voice steady. "No, that is her." James's brow furrowed. "The doctor?" I nodded. "Yes." He stared at the drawing, his breath catching. "Why the red lines?" I did not hesitate, the truth clear in Noah's strokes. "He is saying she is loud but does not listen." James's face paled, a cold weight settling in his eyes. He looked at Noah, who would not meet his gaze, and something shifted, a crack in the armor he wore. "I thought I was helping him," he said, more to himself than to me. I looked up, my voice quiet but unwavering. Sometimes the loudest people are the ones who hear the least. James did not argue. He could not. He sat in the armchair across from us, his hands folded, and for once, he stayed still. The silence was not awkward. It was intentional. Noah, reassured by the quiet, flipped through his sketchbook, pausing on the trio he had drawn days ago: a tall man, a girl with a ponytail, a boy labeled Noah. He tapped it gently, once. James saw, his throat tightening. "That is us, is it not?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Noah did not respond, but his hand rested on the image a second longer before turning the page. I began sorting the pencils, one by one, not pushing, not asking. Noah drew again, a tree with roots that reached beyond the page. James watched, his eyes soft, searching. I felt the weight of his doubt, his fear that I was a fluke, a risk. But I saw Noah's steady hands, his clear rejection of Dr. Grant's noise, and knew the truth. He was not a puzzle to be solved. He was a boy who chose who to trust, and he had chosen me. As I packed my things, Mother's footsteps echoing in the hall, I glanced at James. His face was a map of conflict, guilt, hope, shame. He did not speak, but his silence said enough. He was beginning to see. Noah stood, his sketchbook under his arm, and blinked at me once. "Tomorrow," I whispered. He nodded, almost imperceptible. I left the library, my heart heavy but sure, the red slashed drawing burned into my mind. James had called in an expert to fix his son. But what if the fix was the problem? What if Noah was already whole, waiting for us to listen? The library's air was thick with the scent of old books and wax, but beneath it lingered something new, a tension, sharp and alive, like the moment before a storm breaks. Noah's drawing of Dr. Grant, slashed with red, had shifted something in James Harper. He had not spoken since, but his silence was different now, not cold, but watchful, as if he were seeing his son for the first time. I knelt beside Noah, my sketchbook open, my heart a steady drum. I was 16, a maid's daughter with no right to be here, yet Noah's trust was a tether I could not break. Today I would push further, not with force but with care, and pray I did not lose him. Noah sat by the window, his pencils aligned, yellow, blue, red, green, purple, a ritual that grounded us both. His sketchbook was open to a tree, its roots sprawling like veins, the same one he had drawn after Dr. Grant's failure. He did not look up, but his fingers twitched, a signal he was ready. I smiled, small and careful, and opened my notebook. "Hello, Noah," I said, my voice soft as the morning's light. He blinked once, his eyes flicking to mine, then back to his page. We were still us, despite the cracks. I began to draw, a fox, its tail curling into a spiral, stars dotting the sky above. Noah watched, his blue pencil hovering, then added a single line, a hill under the fox, like our first days. I felt James's gaze through the cameras, always there, searching for proof I was not a mistake. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on Noah's steady breaths, the way his shoulders softened when I showed him a flashcard. Espoir, French for hope. He blinked twice, his fingers brushing the yellow pencil. We drew in silence, the scratch of graphite a quiet vow, until I decided to try something new. I had been reading about abstract words, how they could reach deeper, touch emotions Noah might not name. I pulled out a small stack of cards from my backpack, each handwritten with care. Remember. Believe. Belong. I laid them out, not pushing, just offering. Noah's eyes scanned them, his hand pausing over belong, the same word that had stopped him cold yesterday. He did not touch it, but he did not look away. I held my breath, my chest tight, and moved on, showing him ensemble, French for together. He blinked twice, his fingers brushing the blue pencil again. Then, without warning, Noah reached for the stack, his movements slow but sure. He picked up a card I had not planned to show, one I had slipped in without thinking, a placeholder among the others. Emily, it read, in my own block letters. He held it in one hand, his eyes steady, and pointed to a sketch I had drawn days ago. Me, sitting beside him under a tree, my ponytail loose, my smile soft. My breath caught, my hand frozen over my sketchbook. He did not look at me, but he did not need to. Emily, he said, clear and deliberate, his voice a quiet thunder that shook the room. The air shifted, heavy with something sacred. I froze, my pencil halfway to the page, my eyes burning with heat I could not blink away. Noah had spoken, not a color, not a word I had taught, but my name, chosen from his own heart. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile to keep from overwhelming him. Noah, I said, my voice barely a whisper, unsure if I should move or stay still. He looked up, his eyes oceans, deep and unguarded, and the silence stretched, full of everything we did not need to say. Slowly, I extended my hand. He did not flinch. He placed the card in my palm, his fingers brushing mine, a trust so fragile it stole my breath. James stood in the hallway just beyond the open door, his breath caught in his chest. He had not meant to linger, but Noah's voice, my name, had stopped him cold. He leaned against the wall, his hands trembling, his tie suddenly too tight. It was not just a word. It was a bridge, Noah reaching across the silence to name something real. Love, not loud or dramatic, but steady, built from being seen. James did not enter the room. He did not speak. He just stood, feeling a weight he had carried for years begin to crack, a warmth seeping through. The rest of the session passed in a blur. Noah drew a star above my fox, his lines sure, his face calm. I added a moon, my hand steady despite the storm in my chest. We did not speak again, but we did not need to. His trust was a gift, one I would carry carefully. When Mother came to fetch me, her footsteps soft in the hall, I packed my things, my heart full. Noah glanced at me as I stood, his eyes clear, a faint tilt at the corner of his mouth. Tomorrow, I whispered. He blinked once. It was enough. That night, James sat in his office, the monitors dark, his hands folded on his desk. He had replayed the footage, Noah saying my name, his finger pointing to my sketch, until the image was burned into his mind. He had hired experts, spent thousands, built systems to fix his son. None had reached him. But I had, with a card, a sketch, a moment of quiet. He leaned back, his eyes on the ceiling, and felt something shift, not just in Noah, but in himself. He remembered Sarah, her laugh, her Mandarin bedtime stories, the way she had whispered freedom when speaking of Noah's future. He had locked that away, thinking it lost. But Noah was finding it, and I was the guide. James stood, his movements slow, and walked to Noah's room. The door was cracked open, the way Sarah used to leave it. He stepped inside, his shadow soft in the moonlight. Noah lay under his blanket, not asleep, his eyes watching the ceiling's shadows. James approached, his throat tight. "Good night, Noah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, the words strange on his tongue. He had not said them since Sarah was alive. He did not expect a reply, but he said it anyway, hoping it might land. There was a pause, a breath held in the dark. Then Noah turned his head, his voice small but certain. "Night, Papa." James's knees buckled, his hand gripping the bed frame to keep from falling. 2 words, simple but heavy, hit him like a flood. He stepped back, his chest tight, and stood in the hallway, one hand pressed against his mouth, holding in something he could not name. Love, maybe. Or truth. Noah had answered, not out of duty, but because he wanted to. And I had opened the door. Noah's voice, "Night, Papa," echoed in my mind like a stone dropped in still water, its ripples spreading through the mansion's cold halls. I stood in the library, my sneakers silent on the marble, my backpack heavy with the weight of what had changed. Noah had spoken my name, then his father's, not as practice but as truth. James Harper's eyes, once sharp with doubt, now held something softer, a crack in the fortress he had built. I was 16, a maid's daughter with no right to this moment, yet here I was holding a bridge Noah had chosen to cross. But bridges are fragile, and I felt the weight of what came next. The library was quiet, its air thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood. Noah sat by the window, his pencils aligned, yellow, blue, red, green, purple, a ritual that steadied my heart. His sketchbook was open to a new page, a fox with stars above its head, the same one we had drawn yesterday. He did not look up, but his fingers twitched, a signal he was ready. I knelt a few feet away, my movements slow, careful. "Hello, Noah," I said, my voice soft as the dawn's light. He blinked once, his eyes flicking to mine, then back to his page. We were still us, but something new hummed between us. I opened my notebook, tracing a rabbit beside his fox, its ears tipped with gold. Noah watched, his blue pencil hovering, then added a hill, a quiet echo of our first days. I felt James's gaze through the cameras, always there, but today it felt different. Not searching for flaws, but for answers. I pulled out a flashcard, souvenir, French for remember. Noah blinked twice, his fingers brushing the yellow pencil. We drew in silence, the scratch of graphite a steady pulse, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Noah's voice, the way James had stood in the hallway, his hand pressed to his mouth, holding in a flood. That afternoon, Mother found me in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes heavy with news. "Emily," she said, her voice low, "Mr. Harper wants to speak with you." My stomach twisted, a flicker of doubt creeping in. Had I overstepped? Had Noah's words shaken James too deeply? I nodded, wiping my hands on my jeans, and followed her to his office. The door was heavy, its wood polished to a mirror's shine. James sat behind his desk, his suit pristine, but his tie was loose, a small rebellion against his usual control. He gestured to a chair, his face unreadable. "Sit," he said. I sat, my hands folded, my heart a drumbeat. James leaned forward, his eyes searching mine, not with anger but with something raw, unguarded. "I am starting something," he said, his voice quiet but sure. "An institute for children like Noah, named for Sarah." Sarah. His late wife, Noah's mother, a ghost who lingered in every silence. I nodded, my throat tight, unsure what he wanted from me. "It will not be a school," he continued. "Not a clinic. A place where connection comes first." "You showed me that." His words landed like stones, heavy with meaning. I swallowed, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. I just listened to him, I said. That is all. James's gaze softened, a crack in his armor. That is everything, he said. He slid a folder across the desk, its pages filled with plans, sketches of a classroom, notes on curriculum, a logo with Sarah Institute in elegant script. I want your help, he said. Not as a maid's daughter, as a guide. My breath caught, my mind racing. I was no expert, no teacher. I was Emily Carter, with a sketchbook and a stubborn heart. But Noah's voice, his trust, told me I was enough. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. Okay. The next day, the mansion buzzed with whispers. Staff spoke of the Institute, of James's sudden shift, of Noah's words spreading like wildfire. A teacher called, then a therapist, asking to observe my methods. A local paper requested an interview, curious about the girl who had reached the unreachable boy. I refused them all, my voice firm when Mother read their emails aloud. This is not about me, I said, my eyes on the garden where Noah and I had planted Liberté. I was not here for praise or fame. I was here for Noah, for the boy who had named me. In the library, Noah waited, his sketchbook open to a new drawing, a train, a dog, a robot, all in his uneven lines. I knelt beside him, my backpack lighter today, carrying only what we needed. I pulled out a laminated sheet, emotion faces with captions in 5 languages, happy, sad, safe. Noah lingered over seguro, Spanish for safe, his fingers brushing it twice before pointing to himself, then to me. My chest warmed, a quiet vow forming. I opened my notebook, wrote family in English, and placed it between us. Noah glanced at it, his eyes steady, and tapped it once. I smiled, small and careful, and began to draw. That evening, James stood outside Noah's room, his hand on the doorframe, the folder from his office tucked under his arm. He had not planned to come here, not yet, but something pulled him, a need to see his son, to feel the truth of what was growing. Noah was awake, his eyes on the ceiling, a blue crayon in his hand. James stepped inside, his voice soft. "Good night, Noah," he said, the words easier now, a ritual reborn. Noah turned his head, his voice small but certain. "Night, Papa." James nodded, his throat tight, and stepped back. In his office, James opened the folder, but his eyes drifted to a sealed envelope tucked inside, its edges worn from months of waiting. He had told himself it was gratitude, a way to thank the girl who had brought his son back. But it was more. It was truth. The envelope held adoption papers, not charity, but a promise. Emily belonged with them, not because of what she had done, but because of who she was. He closed the folder, his hand steady, and felt the weight of a decision he could no longer delay. The Institute was not enough. Noah's words were not enough. Emily was family, and he would make it real. As I left the library, Noah's latest drawing, a fox under a tree with seguro written in his shaky hand, burned in my mind. I stepped into the garden, the air cool against my skin, and knelt by the patch where we had planted Liberté. A tiny sprout had broken the surface, green and fragile, a promise kept. I smiled, my heart full, but a shadow lingered. James's envelope, glimpsed in his office, felt like a secret I was not ready to name. What was he planning, and why did it feel like everything was about to change? The Sarah Institute's first graduation was not grand, but it was alive, the air thick with the scent of fresh paint and hope. I stood on a small wooden stage, my sneakers scuffed, my ponytail loose, holding Noah's hand as he faced the crowd. His eyes, once locked on pencils and pages, now met the world with quiet confidence. James Harper sat in the front row, his suit pristine but his hands trembling, clutching a sealed envelope that carried a weight I could feel across the room. I was 16, a maid's daughter who had stumbled into a family, and today I would learn what that meant. But first, Noah would speak. The room was modest, a repurposed wing of the mansion, its walls lined with children's drawings, foxes, stars, trees, each a story of trust. Parents and staff filled the seats, their faces soft with awe, not for grades or trophies, but for moments no one had thought possible. Noah, now 9, stood tall, his dark hair falling over eyes that sparkled like Sarah's must have. I felt her presence, not as a ghost, but as a warmth, in the way Noah squeezed my hand, in the way James's gaze held us both. I smiled, small and careful, and stepped back, giving Noah the stage. "My name is Noah," he began, his voice clear, steady, cutting through the room like a bell. "I used to be very quiet, but I was always listening." The crowd leaned in, a murmur of recognition rippling through. He paused, not frozen, but present, his fingers brushing the flashcard in his pocket, one I had made years ago. Ciel, French for sky. "The first word I learned was a color," he said, his eyes finding James, then me. "The last one is this, family." He let the word hang, giving it room to breathe, and the room erupted in applause. I did not clap, not right away. My eyes burned, but I held the tears back, my heart a drumbeat of pride and something deeper, recognition. Noah had named us, not just as people, but as home. I looked at James, his face a map of emotion, the envelope still in his hands. He stood, slow and deliberate, his eyes never leaving us. The applause faded, but the silence was not empty. It was full, heavy with healing, with truth. I felt it in my bones, a certainty that I was no longer temporary, no longer the maid's daughter slipping through cracks. I belonged. The ceremony continued, soft and unpolished. A girl, once silent like Noah, read a poem, her voice trembling but sure. A boy played a tune on a small piano, its notes inspired by his first spoken word. Parents wept, unashamed, their hands clasped tight. I stood beside Noah, my presence steady, my pride unspoken but glowing. He leaned against me, his shoulder warm, and I knew this was enough. But James's envelope loomed, a question I could not ignore. When the speeches ended, families spilled onto the lawn, taking photos, laughing, their voices a soft hum against the garden's quiet. Noah stayed near the stage, his arms loosely crossed, watching with a satisfaction that needed no words. I joined him, my sketchbook tucked under my arm, its pages worn from years of foxes and stars. "You did good," I said, my voice soft. He did not answer, just leaned closer, his head brushing my shoulder. James approached, his steps careful, the envelope now in his hand, its edges creased from months of waiting. He stopped before us, his eyes searching mine, not with authority but with something raw, vulnerable. "Emily," he said, his voice low, steady. He held out the envelope, his hand steady despite the tremor in his fingers. I looked at it, then at him, my breath catching. I knew what it was, not in detail but in truth. Adoption papers, not charity, but a promise. I was 16, too old to need a father, yet my chest ached with a longing I had never named. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Okay. Yes." James's face softened, a crack in the fortress he had built. He did not speak, but his eyes said everything. Gratitude, love, certainty. Noah looked between us, his face calm, a faint tilt at the corner of his mouth. He reached for my hand, then James's, linking us in a quiet circle. No one spoke. We did not need to. The garden stretched before us, its soil dotted with tiny markers. Liberté, celo, ensemble. Words we had planted, now sprouting green and sure. The Sarah Institute was not just a place. It was a language, one we had built together, word by word, silence by silence. The crowd began to thin, families drifting to their cars, but we stayed, rooted by the stage. A teacher nodded to me, her eyes warm with respect. A parent whispered thanks, her voice thick with tears. I bowed my head, not for applause, but for the work still ahead. The institute was growing, its classrooms filled with children who drew, planted, listened. A boy who had not spoken in 3 years now hummed melodies. A girl wrote her name in the garden's dirt. Critics called it sentimental, but the truth was louder. Connection was not a theory. It was real. James stood beside us, his hand resting on Noah's shoulder, the envelope now tucked inside his jacket. He was not the man who had accused me in the library, not the man who had built walls around his grief. He was learning, listening, letting go. I thought of Sarah, her Mandarin stories, her laugh, the way she had wanted Noah to be free. She was here, in the sprout by Liberté, in Noah's voice, in the family we had become. I closed my eyes, the garden's damp air filling my lungs, and felt her approval, soft as a breeze. Noah tugged my hand, pointing to the garden, where a new sprout had broken through beside family. He smiled, small but bright, and I knew he saw it too. We had planted more than words. We had planted home. James followed my gaze, his throat tightening, and for the first time, he did not look away. The silence between us was not absence. It was arrival, healing, truth. And as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in colors Noah could name, I knew this was the end of one story and the beginning of another. One we would write together,